So, any new listeners, I currently live in Miami. Miami has its own Grand Prix. And while I was doing some driving, visiting some family, doing some adult things, whatever, I'm moving, there's a lot of stuff going on. But I have driven past Hard Rock Stadium numerous times. And not only have I seen the evolution of the setup for the Miami Grand Prix, but officially, as of 2 days ago, and I can say 2 days ago because on Sunday they did not exist, the city of Miami has started to, or the Grand Prix has started to, advertise for the Miami GP on billboards. While you're driving up and down the Florida Turnpike, there are Formula One cars all over the place, and it's great.
Cole and Briana are lined up on the grid. It's lights out, and away we go on this week's grid walk.
It is weirdly upsetting in such a way that I lived in Miami for many years, but none of those years overlapped with the Formula One Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Like, I could perfectly envision the amount of time that I have spent at Hard Rock Stadium that was formerly called other things when I was there, but yet I've never been to the Miami Grand Prix. I get that there's only been 1 year, but I felt so much pain and FOMO last year. I was like, I have been in all those seats.
I could literally, and I've only sent them to you, and I could probably, this may be a content idea, I don't know if anyone would ever be interested in this, I could probably make a compilation of all of the videos I have taken of me running across the track, quote unquote, during a football tailgate, and me fangirling about grid spots because we're walking across the starting line, and like no one that I'm with cares, and I'm like, I need to sit on the floor and pretend I'm a car.
Yeah, I every single photo that came out, like Lewis sitting in those blue chairs in Hard Rock Stadium taking photos, and I'm like, yep, I've sat there, and I've sat there, and oh, those were my normal seats, and like, oh, they're walking in that place, I've spent a lot of time there, like, oh, that is where I would buy my chicken tenders at halftime. Like, it is so weird to see all these people, very famous people in Formula One context, just like walking around where we hung out in college. It's so confusing to me.
Yeah, it is very weird, and that is, what comes with having a college football team that plays in an NFL stadium. But I also, as being a tailgate college football veteran, I contribute a lot of I had so much fun at free practice for the Miami GP because I knew how to navigate that whole entire stadium, and people are like, it's so big, it's all these places, and I'm like, there's bathrooms inside and I can find air conditioning, and I just knew where to go. So it felt like a cheat sheet to the Miami GP, and I know we're debating whether to go. We're trying. I mean, we really want to go, but we're just like, does it make sense for us to go?
It's so not cheap, which is not news to anyone listening.
Surprise! They have fake boats. I saw them building. The fake beach is already being constructed.
But if I was going to predict what's going to happen, is that it's going to be about 3 weeks from now, and you and I are going to look at each other, and you're going to be like, Briana, book the tickets. Like, book them.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm admitting that we're like, oh, it would be fun, but like, do we want to do it this year? Like, but yeah, it's on things where I'm like, I know those things, I know that city, I know those places, and I'm like, I want to be there.
Yeah. And like, there's a million ways of how we're like, it just doesn't make sense. And everyone's like, well, the slight caveat is I'm kind of moving to New York right now in the process. So and like, I will be officially out of Miami basically a week or two after the GP. So it's like, okay, we could sleep on a floor. But yeah, so
weirdly, that's convincing me more that we should go, because
it's like we have a floor to sleep on. We don't have to pay these hotel prices. We still have to pay for the ticket.
Will your car still be there?
Yes.
Oh,
this is now becoming like a meeting.
Yeah, this is now becoming you and I discussing the logistics of the Miami GP. But to your earlier point, that's amazing content. We have to make that content of you running through it, because I've seen all those videos and we need to share those. And we also will probably do something, whether or not we're there, of like, here's a photo of F1 driver, here's a photo of us in that same place. Even if it's like 19, 20-year-old baby us's in
Right.
that location.
Right. I'm telling, like, it's like when they posted the picture of their fancy new paddock club that they're building, and I'm like, there's a bridge to the stadium. Oh my gosh, there's going to be kids that just jump the ramp and walk that bridge, and they're going to be walking around the paddock in the middle of a game against Bethune-Cookman. Like,
oh my gosh, anyone who's not a college football fan will not get that joke.
over your head, but it's funny.
Right.
Just take it over.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So literally every time we have a conversation about this, I'm like, we have to go. So maybe that's the takeaway. But stay tuned.
Someone tell us that we should go, or someone give us tickets and we'll go. We'll make you great content.
Sure. Right.
Right. That's why I'm saying.
All I need right now to book the flight cross country to Miami is for one person to be like, go to the Miami GP. So we are coming off a race week. Speaking of Miami, we're coming off race week number 2. So many things came out of this race. We have the Red Bull's a rocket ship. I don't fully grasp exactly what's going on with Aston Martin. Like, is Alonso just good, or how fast really are they? Can they actually compete with Red Bull? Ferrari had a weekend. They really had a weekend. And I personally, as a Mercedes and Lewis fan, don't quite know what I'm supposed to be feeling right now. I don't know if I should be happy, sad, discouraged, encouraged, frustrated. I think I'm feeling all the emotions at once. We also had an abundance of pop culture. Just feels like rushed into the system. So we're going to have an extra long gossip grid. But unfortunately, we've only made it to race 2 of the season. And we have to start with the FIA. So let's go into the wild here.
Yeah, it definitely didn't take long for the FIA to make this about themselves.
It's not good when the 4 biggest storylines coming out of the weekend are just about the zebras.
Just about the zebras. And that might be confusing for some people that maybe don't watch American sports.
Or aren't in our brains constantly. Yes. So we call this segment where we're going to just spend a bunch of time talking about what's going on with the FIA and how they affected the race this weekend into the wild. Because in America, all referees, for the most part, wear some version of black and white stripes historically. So even though the FIA are not out there on track wearing black and white stripes, I always refer to them as the refs of F1, and therefore the zebras of F1. So we are into the wild right now.
Understatement of the century. Into the wild.
So where do we start with all the things that happened? I would argue maybe the beginning of the race weekend, where the first announcement we got was that the FIA was banning any wheels on track walks. So no more bikes or scooters. Which, whether or not that's the right decision, what?
I'm bummed for 2 reasons. One is the actual reason of, there's a million other things that the FIA could be looking at to, be regulating. And we've been saying that literally since episode 1, and this is only episode 9, so that's saying a lot. And then my second grievance is, how dare the FIA now just prevent us from receiving more drivers on bikes and wheeled vehicles and really silly photo content, because it's always so ridiculous to see. So it's a double-edged sword of, you have so many other things that are important, and don't take this away from us, unless they're obviously safety things, bigger safety things to be considering right now.
Yeah. I did get upset for fans, because I do know on tracks, not only the American tracks, but on some of the tracks that have smaller visitation, they will let fans on the track on days like Thursday. And I know because the drivers go out on bikes, they'll stop and they'll take photos or write autographs for fans who are there. And Charles Leclerc came out and said that he is not going to just do any more track walks because he only wants to do it on a bike. So there is the fan component of it where I am sad that it does seem like a decent amount of drivers will stop going out and meeting fans won't get that interaction anymore. I fundamentally just think it's, to your point, silly, so low on the priority list, whether or not it's a safety problem, cool, but and I still think it's just another thing that just feels like an unnecessary policing of what the drivers do. Which takes us to FIA event number 2, which is really every single week we're going to have the meeting with Lewis's medical doctor about the exception to the nose ring. Can't we just have once at the beginning and then just be done?
Nope. Different nose, different piercing, different person. I don't know. It makes no sense. It's like, if it's not okay for one, why not be okay for another? Don't know. But you know what? If FIA bot continues to tweet out that every week it'll just be Lewis Hamilton, given clearance to maintain, not remove his piercing for medical reasons. Great. More ridiculousness of just the FIA. Let's compile it all together. I'll wear it as like a crown at the end of the season.
Right. So we haven't even hit an on-track session, and we have two things. And I personally was feeling coming out of Thursday, oh, okay, got it. This might be one of those weekends. And we were right. So, good. You know what? I'm going to break up the bad here. There was a new update that came out this weekend that was positive, and they did do an update to the driver penalty system where now drivers only get penalties on their license for transgressions that are like dangerous driving. So we don't end up with a situation where a driver gets a race ban because he went over the speed limit 12 times in the pit lane.
See, but what's fun about that is Pierre still has 10 points until the end of May.
Yeah, which, again, I don't understand. If the FIA is going to change this now, why don't they retroactively change the points that they were given? But
because then what will people talk about? What will the correspondents be able to talk about anytime Pierre almost maybe kind of does something? And then they can say, 10 points. If it's 12 points, they miss a race. 12 points, you miss a race. Did you know 12 points, you miss a race? And, it's not per season. It's calendar year. We've heard it so many times. It's still crazy. Because there were so many times I feel like it's like, oh.
The FIA's made it pretty clear they're not going to penalize him for anything as well. So at this point, it's just silly. It's like, what's the point of it? All right. So the big headline things that I'm sure every podcast is talking about is, should Fernando have gotten a penalty? Should he have not? And should that have been his podium? Should that have been George's podium? And I just I want to roll, okay, at this point, I'm just going to turn this back onto our zebras and say, why? And just talk about that. One, why did we not know until the end of the race that this was a possibility? It happened so early in the race, this could have been identified earlier. But then two, him getting to keep his podium because 7 instances in the past, the FIA couldn't follow their own rules, therefore he gets a pass. I just want us to recognize the silliness of that, because if there's 7 times that they were able to pull that the FIA didn't penalize this, I just want to acknowledge that means there's probably 100 other times where the rules were followed.
Yeah, Aston Martin just went to find enough that's like, okay, this is enough receipts that you're like, people aren't penalized. It's probably been at least every other race, if not. I could not believe when Aston Martin was able to so quickly provide evidence of like, hey, look what you did not do.
Right. This was identified in a pre-meeting going into this season. Like, we could get away with this loophole, so if there is a penalty, put the jack under there. And so the fact that we are at a point of incompetency with stewarding of this sport, that the reason Fernando got to keep his podium is because the FIA is bad at enforcing their own rules, is just silly. And we just need to acknowledge that that's silly. Whether or not you think he deserved the podium or not, I don't care. I just think this is silliness. And I can't believe it's race 2, and we had to wait 3 hours after the race to get the final result of all of this.
It's unbelievably silly, and honestly created like super awkward moment. And that's where I'm here to say, I created a podium of 3 really awkward moments from this weekend. Maybe FIA is involved, maybe they're not. But I have an FIA podium, I have a awkward moments podium to share for the Saudi Arabian GP. So starting with P3, we have the Charles radio right after the safety car. And it's, push for the safety car, line on Lewis. And Charles just is like, you have to tell me this earlier. And all they could say, copy. And he curses. Super awkward. So uncomfortable. Like, so Ferrari. And we haven't even gotten into Ferrari already. But just like that was like so unbelievably weird. P2 is the entire cool-down room after the race. So between Max and Checo's discussion of Checo, like, did they tell you to stay on pace? What was your time? Like that bickering, while Max continues to sit down in the P1 chair, just probably out of force of habit. And then Alonso sits in the P2 chair, and no one is sitting where they're supposed to. The conversations are so strange. I felt so awkward, and probably the only more awkward meeting was the race debrief meeting at Red Bull. So what we saw, cool down room, incredibly awkward.
Right, we've seen worse cooldown rooms. Someone's thrown things at people before, so I thought it was relatively civil. And I don't think Max did that on purpose, but just the visuals of it. Right.
It was definitely, I'm not saying Max did that on purpose. I really think probably out of force of habit, he sits down in the same chair he always sits in. But it was just so unbelievably funny. And then for Fernando to also sit in the wrong chair made it up for me. And P1, of course, this entire back and forth gave me whiplash. The FIA giving Fernando P3, Alonso P3, like, whoop, that's the same person, but he got P3 twice, and George also got P3 in there too. That backlash. FIA, figure out what you're doing. Take maybe less than 30 laps to figure out if a penalty was served correctly. Unbelievable. Mercedes made good jokes about it. Aston Martin made good jokes about it. But, like, oh my God, I couldn't keep track of who is P3. Very awkward.
The winner of the weekend was Fernando's social media post asking for the trophy back. But yes, the whole thing was just like, why are we doing this? This is so incredibly uncomfortable. Like, yeah. And then I will, like, tack on last FIA thing is apparently the reason we got the safety car is because Lance tried to take the off-road to get the car off the track, and he couldn't because there was a tractor in the way. And what's the point of having an off-road for a driver to get off safely as quickly as possible and then to park something in the way?
I don't know how. I've never had such, like, anger and fury against tractors, but, like, suddenly I've developed this in recent years of just, like, and it's all because of F1 and all of the horrible things. But it was a nightmare just all over. Shout out to Fernando Alonso and George Russell for being good sports about it. And also, I just loved George's radio at the end of the race when they were like, oh, you're 5.1. And he just goes, fudge.
Like, he can curse on the radio, but of course...
And he did! Like, at the points of the race, he cursed. But at that moment, clear as day, on the FIA, on F1's current YouTube page, fudge.
Yeah. So, truly, the FIA thing is baffling to me, because I will always compare them as the ref to other sports. And look, I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. It's been a rough go with refs recently. But I have decent confidence in every other sport I watch that at least the refs are out there trying to be competent. I don't necessarily think that the ref who called that penalty on the Eagles that shouldn't have been a penalty at the end of the Super Bowl, I don't think that ref was trying to make it about himself or was like bought in a back room or doing like these backroom deals on like, this is how we do it, or like he was trying to follow the rules. It is what it is. I will one day get over it. But
we are not an NFL podcast, so we can't dive too much into this. But when I tell you that Briana and I have not discussed the Super Bowl at all, off pod or on pod, this is the first time I've gotten any discussion about the Super Bowl from Briana, and I'm like, wow. But you took the adult time and really sat with that, because as a Eagles fan by proxy for you, I was not as even keeled, but we don't need to go into that. But
no, and I'm still devastated. But I don't think there's any ill will attached to that, nor did I in the moment. And everyone online, no rational person was out there being like, it's rigged, or anything like that. And I can never confidently say that about the FIA. Everything they do feels like a backroom deal, and that's all that's going on here. And it's with the NFL, it's always like, did they follow their rules correctly or to the letter, like how they should have? With the FIA, it's like, oh, they're just not following their rules, and like right now we're going to throw that all out, and I won't bring up and get into like, all of this is just very triggering because of 2021, always. But
FIA follow rules sometimes when they want to.
Right, which is so frustrating as someone who wants to watch a sport get litigated correctly and to their own rules. That's all I ever want, is the FIA to follow their own rules. This was the first time this season that I Googled who is the current race director. And we have not memorized his name yet. And it has not gone down in infamy yet. And there was a past race director whose name I will not say on this podcast right now because it triggers me and many other people. But I will just give a warning that as a race director, it's not a good thing when podcast hosts have to look up your name. So just be careful. Just be careful. That's all, you know? I don't want to know you. I don't want to know who my referees are. Things are bad when you know the refs' names. That's it. That's how I feel about sports.
It's true. I've only Googled the names of referees when I'm super upset.
No. Zebras, go into the wild and stay hidden in the wild. I calculated Red Bull's race pace, and I think there's two big Red Bull questions leaving this weekend. One is, so just how much faster is Red Bull? Like, there's varying takeaways that we're hearing. Just how much faster are they? And I needed to know, which is why I calculated the race pace. But also, I think, coupled with that is, do we believe that Sergio Perez can actually compete with Max, at least for a little bit, for the championship?
It's a very interesting question, and you and I've had a couple of discussions about it, but I think, like, the person you asked that question to, who is the only person that knows the answer, thus we all know the answer, is Max. Like,
True.
It's not, do we believe that Perez can? It's like, Max will just make sure that, like, he can't. Or, like, given any opportunity to just stay in front, and you know that Max wanted P1 and, like, be able to come back through all of this. And shout out to Checo for just pushing and, like, keeping that P1. Because he had to be sweating in that. So, I mean, I think Checo will. It all just kind of depends on what happens to Max, because Red Bull can say and give whatever pace they want. Max wants to win. Max literally came out and gave quotes of saying he's not here to be second. And it was great for the team. He's not here to be second. And he got that fastest lap just to ensure that there's not a week that he's not in first place of Drivers' Championship.
I agree with you. I do think it's an interesting development that Red Bull seems like they're not going to be Team Max right now. I thought that was the most interesting thing to come out, that they were giving both drivers the same times, and they then just let them loose to race because they couldn't control them. When historically, they would have just been like, Checo, slow down, swap cars.
Yeah. It felt very like almost Ferrari moment of Red Bull, where they're like, we have this on lock. Like, there's going to be or a Mercedes. Yeah, I guess I'm just speaking of like a recent
last year, yeah.
Like a team is not calling team orders, and like everyone's getting the same guidelines, and it's like a team effort and not like here's a driver that needs to move in order to, like, it so felt like, this is weird that we're not just seeing a team orders occur to give like Max the go ahead.
I do think that Red Bull as an entity is smart, and they understand. So it all goes back to this franchise model. All 10 teams at the end of the day have the same financial interest, which is, even though they're competing on the racetrack, they need F1 to be healthy. And I do think Red Bull is smart enough to understand, if we're going to have this crazy dominant car, we need to do what Mercedes did and let our drivers fight, even if it's not necessarily always the fairest fight, because I think we both think Max would have been P1, would have won that race easily if it wasn't for the drive shaft failure in qualifying.
Yeah.
But I think for just perception, for viewership, to making sure people don't evacuate the sport at race 2, I think Red Bull understands they can't get on the radio and give team orders for financial reasons. That being said...
I hope so. Because Christian had plenty of quotes when, Mercedes was up in the front and, dominating and talking about how horrible it was for the sport. So, at least we got to see... There was interesting racing this weekend, no matter what. And even if that interesting racing was Max passing 15 people, that's incredible just to see happen, even though you knew it was going to happen.
Yeah. Two things to your point. I think there's 2 different eras of Mercedes dominance we can look at, and they have 2 different effects. So there's the early, they first hybrid power unit come out the gates 2014, 15, 16. And Mercedes was very much at that time let our drivers race. And then we got 2016 as a result of that with the whole explosion of Nico and Lewis, which I think Mercedes has since learned that maybe letting them race in that way wasn't the perfect way to let them race. But through the entire Valtteri-Lewis partnership, they always were told to let race. And when the car was incredibly dominant in 2020, 2019, they were told they were allowed to race. Lewis was just faster. But there was it never really felt like there was until late 2019 is interesting because Ferrari had the alleged, not confirmed, rumored, very illegal power unit at the beginning of the season. So I think at the beginning of the season, there was no, let them race because they were competing with Ferrari. But then they weren't competing with Ferrari anymore. But I digress a little bit. I think it's interesting to see a modern Red Bull in this situation. I do think for perception that they did the right thing this weekend in making sure viewership doesn't go down. But I to the original question, can Checo fight with Max? It depends how many things go wrong with Max's car. We do have a bunch of street races coming up in the early parts of the season. Is there actual Honda power unit issues, and do those disproportionately affect Max? Then we're going to have a longer championship battle. And I think Honda PU reliability issues. Let's all collectively pray, because I did pull the race pace numbers, and it's about a second a lap. I think it's 0.6, sometimes a half a second to the Aston, but it's to Mercedes and Ferrari, it's about a second a lap, more to the Alpine. It's an astronomical amount of pace beyond everyone else.
Yeah. And I've listened to a couple podcasts, and the big question online is, we know that Max isn't going to win every single race this year because he didn't. And then people are like, well, do you think Alonso can win one race? And the answer is, well, if the Honda power unit continues to have reliability issues and something happens to Max and Checo in a race, well, there you go, straight out. But even still, I think there's more ways that it can happen, but it doesn't seem impossible.
No, because motor racing's fluky, and there's going to be some random race where some crash happens, there's just it happens. If you even just looking at last year, Mercedes didn't win Brazil because they just all of a sudden got pace. Fluky things happened. They won the Brazil race. We have 6 sprint races this year. There's going to be more races with less prep time. There will be one weekend where stuff just goes wrong because there's a lot of races now. Mm-hmm. If we had 16 races this season, I would be no, it's all probably good. But there's 23, so. But this does allude to one of the podiums that I brought for this recording. Words.
Yes. Saudi Arabian GP podiums.
Yes.
What's your first podium?
So I have 2. I need to do them together. It's moments that made me very sad this weekend, and then I'm going to group that with moments that actually made me smile this weekend. I don't like to
probably the sad one should have been wah wah wah.
Yeah. Yep. I didn't want to just talk about the things that made me sad. So I'll start with P3, moments that made me sad, is the announcement that Angela is no longer going to be in the paddock with Lewis. Yeah, maybe we should use the wah wah wah.
No, I was that didn't feel right. Yeah, big bummer.
Yeah, I was sad. She is, well, there are so many amazing women working in the paddock. Because of the time she spends standing next to Lewis, she is one of the most visual on TV, like, examples of women working in the paddock. So, show more women on the pit wall. But moments that made me happy, P3. Alonso's social media post.
Unhinged.
Amazing. Keep doing it. I think he is doing social media better than the 20-somethings in the paddock right now.
I agree. As soon as he hit the gritty, I was like, this is it.
Yeah. Someone there understands. All right, moments that made me sad, P2. The time I spent calculating just how much faster the Red Bull is than everyone else. But moments that made me happy, P2, was all the videos of the Ferrari drivers drawing portraits of each other. Amazing content.
A+.
All right. P1, moments that made me very sad this weekend. Watching Lance slowly DNF. Finally has a fast car. Unfair.
So sad. So sad. And then scary when he just couldn't exit properly.
Right. Well, and then, like, we still don't really know what happened, and there was, like, fire, but I don't know. All right. But, ending on a high note, moments that made me very happy this weekend. P1, well, it's a tie. After all of this chaos, the Mercedes is still tied for 2 in the constructors. And that's tied for P1 with Lewis's black outfit on Saturday.
Lewis killed it with the fits this weekend. It was unbelievable. This man decked out in Dior. I just...
Bringing joy every morning when I wake up, when I definitely needed it this season. Every fit is like a little sparkle of happiness amidst, like, what is going on?
Legitimate. Like sweater of sparkles.
Right. Which leads me to, so, as Mercedes fans, should we feel encouraged? Or how are you personally feeling after this weekend?
I feel better than Bahrain.
Yes. Yeah, I
don't know what that means, but I feel better than Bahrain.
Yeah, I guess I feel better than Bahrain.
Right? I think I don't know how to properly describe my feeling, but it's not as, like,
doom and gloom. The world is
doom
ending.
And gloom.
Yeah.
I mean, the hope didn't necessarily increase, but the doom and gloom has been like a little bit maintained. Right.
Yeah, I feel the same. Seeing them in front of the Ferraris did make me feel better. Only that I can point to a different team and be like, we weren't them that week.
Yeah, being in front of Ferrari definitely makes the difference. But then back to your point, and you pulled the numbers and everything, like, trying to race the Aston Martin just seemed almost impossible, and that really hurt to watch. You know, like, there was some racing, but it was just between, like, you know, being able to maintain grip. It just, like, just because of the nature of F1 and how the laps go and tire degradation goes, it's just like watching any sort of attempt of racing against the Aston Martin was like, what are we doing? And we just knew it was eventually just not gonna go how a Mercedes fan, how we would want it to.
Right.
But
I needed Lance to finish that race to see how that would play out. Because, look, Lance fan, so I also just needed Lance to finish the race. But I will admit that Alonso makes a difference. The same way that Lewis makes a difference in a car. So I needed to see and be able to average that out to get a full understanding of what's going on with the Aston car and how that relates to Mercedes. But I hate that I'm even having that conversation in my brain, to your point.
But it's fair. I mean, having anyone that is, no matter our opinions, and again, we've been very honest of that, we're not necessarily like big Alonso fans. We're Lewis fans. So like, duh. But there's a difference when you have a world championship driver operating any car
Yes.
They just figure out the best way to optimize it. And that is something that, and not as an offense to Lance, like it just would be very interesting to be comparing Alonso's numbers in the car to Lance's numbers in the car.
Yeah. And I'm not upset that I'm having the conversation mostly because of that. I'm upset that I'm even having the conversation of having to compare this Mercedes car to that Aston Martin car. Like, the fact that the bar is now the Aston Martin is so frustrating and upsetting. But we did get this weekend confirmation that we're going to see a completely different car soon. And I just get it right, please, please. And every single time Toto comes out and talks about getting Lewis his 8th, I always feel better. So I'm going to live in that land, and
no one bother us.
No one tell us anything different. I don't want any other knowledge.
Because trust me, we know. We're just not putting it out into the world, but we know.
Right, wait.
That hope alarm. There we go. Right. But
so moving away from Mercedes, because I can't linger on there too long, or I will be back in the Bahrain space, and I want to be in the slightly better than that space of the Saudi Arabian GP. Ferrari really got it wrong this past weekend.
Yeah.
So how are you thinking this is like a temporary? They just really got this weekend wrong. Do you think that's actually the pace of that car? Like, where are you landing on the future of Ferrari? Because this was just moving on from this weekend. This was a bad weekend.
At least, so this opinion is a lot as just kind of where I've just seen the state of Ferrari just going. I think right now there's so much mayhem off track, and I think we started to see that maybe the communication issues or whatever last season may have been an actual part of their whole strategy issue or different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, with a combination of all the things we discussed last week of apparently people are saying it's bad and this is or if it's the media, it just feels like there's so much madness happening off track that it's affecting the mentality on track.
Yeah, I concur. And I've really appreciated Fred Vassar's statements, and he seems very frank and upfront, and I think Ferrari probably needs that, and he definitely seems to have identified and understands the problems. It's just whether he's going to be given the tools to solve them.
Right.
Is always the question with Ferrari. I do think that this weekend was somewhat of an anomaly. I think they heavily reacted to the tire degradation in Bahrain and probably just didn't do enough to figure out what the actual pace of the car this weekend is. Plus, I do not trust that they've solved the power unit problems.
No. I mean, we've seen that was already not solved and flowed over from last season in Bahrain.
Right.
And it's, I don't know, Ferrari's just really determined to be Ferrari, and
yes, yeah, no, that I don't think nothing else. There we go. We're done talking about Ferrari because, gosh, if you're not a Red Bull fan, we all just need hard.
Although being an Aston Martin fan right now is probably really lit.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I wish I could feel that way because I did feel pretty good.
Being a not Aston Martin, not Lance fan.
Yeah, being an Alonso fan feels really great right now. Yes, gotcha. So I guess that all leads us into our misery corner for the race weekend because it's F1. We gotta have our misery corner.
And it's a crowded corner this week.
Yeah.
Well, I think a great way to start off the misery corner, you had some fun things to share about Ferrari, right?
Yeah, I have a Ferrari podium, which is Ferrari moments that signaled to me that it was going to be a bad weekend.
Oh gosh. Oh no. Let's get started.
All right, this one has an honorable mention. When I ran the race pace simulation for FP2.
I feel like I gotta use sad trumpet for these two.
All right, first on the podium, P3. When I identified around halfway through Saturday that they were only posting good photos of Carlos. Yeah.
And then not post sad noises with good pictures of Carlos.
I was like, wow, these are all really good photos. And then I went, oh no, there's no like weird, bad taken, silly. What? It was a bad sign. I wasn't happy.
Actions.
P2, when they announced Charles's penalty, like on Wednesday before the race.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Race 2.
Right, great. I went, oh, okay, not going to be a good weekend. And then P1 was when we got back-to-back days with cold tub thirst trap videos of both of the drivers. That I was like, wow, all right, damage control is going on right now.
It was the perfect example of, look over there! To, like, what was going to happen that weekend.
I just love to imagine that Ferrari's in a PR meeting and they're like, all right, what are we going to do this week that's going to like keep morale high? And the social media person has to raise their hand and be like, we'll post 2 videos, one of each driver in the cold tub before the race. Like, what kind of, like, that's just how I imagine and dream the conversation to go.
Right. And I just like to imagine that it's actually Fred who's recording the whole thing. And like, Charles, get in the bathtub. And it's a lot funnier when you think about it that way. And that's how I will just choose to imagine that whole scenario went down.
Alanis this week, or a couple days ago, tweeted that she's like, it's never been clear that Ferrari has a number 1 driver because Charles Leclerc gets an entire film crew and a high-res video of him in his cold tub, and they just hand Carlos the phone, and they're like, yeah, record a selfie.
Take this old rubber ducky and record a selfie and then drop the phone in the bathtub.
Perfectly captured the personalities, though. I thought it was great.
Oh, yeah. No, it did great.
But we do have some other members in the misery corner today. We have the aforementioned Lance, who, like,
So sad.
it had to be his car that had some mysterious explosion in it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sad.
And even, like, his post-race interviews, like, right after, was just like, I don't know. I don't know what happened, but the brakes were smoking and they had a fire extinguisher. And that's always very scary. I will never adjust to that part of this sport, but terrifying.
You know, my favorite members of Misery Corner this weekend are McLaren, because the fact that Pierre Gasly caused damage to Oscar's car, and then that part of Oscar's car that flew off just so happened to miss every car except for Lando's car, and then both McLarens had to go get their front wings changed within the first 2 laps.
And they still, like, they weren't last. So, you know, it's an improvement.
They are P10 in the standings because AlphaTauri has had a higher finish this season. So...
Oh, yeah, I only meant not last in the race. Not in general.
Oh, yeah, I know what you meant. Because also in our misery corner is, for some reason, Valtteri Bottas was just, like, hanging out in the back of the field.
Yeah, he's let's have a horrible, absolutely terrible, no good time. I actually have a wonderful podium for our misery corner as well. And I worded it as biggest womp womp moments of the weekend.
Wait, okay, I found the sad trumpet. I'm ready for this. Let's go.
That's great. Okay. I tried to not just make it a whole podium of DNFs because it just felt like too easy, but I will give the honorable mention, and I feel like we're about to get here. Honorable mention, Alex Albon. Sad, frustrated radio, and he just deserves better. And I love you, Alex. Thanks for using the right toner. So now I have P3 of my womp womp moments. Man, Yuki was so close to points.
Really?
And his vulgar radio at the end.
And all his post-race interviews where he just looked devastated. He's like, it's the second week in a row, and I'm just trying and admit, like, that AlphaTauri car is not fast, and he is tried so hard for the entire race to try to keep that car in the points. I really felt for him.
And like we, as discussed, like Haas would be competitive for Haas at Saudi Arabia. And they, you know, were able to pull off points. But like the fact that it's Kevin Magnussen, that, yeah, it's rough. It was a rough time for Yuki. My P2, we just discussed Valtteri Bottas. Oh my God. The only person below McLaren. And unfortunately, he says his entire horrible race was caused by the debris flying from the Gasly, like Piastri, Norris, like whole entire like ordeal that happened at the beginning. So McLaren still ended up in front of him, but struggled with grip. There was debris flying everywhere. He literally finished more than a full minute behind Lando and was lapped at the end. So
yeah, it was a rough time. It just always serves as a reminder that, like, if anything gets lodged in that floor, the performance of the car dramatically decreases. Like, we saw this at Silverstone last year with Max's car, and he had the giant piece of AlphaTauri debris stuck in his floor. But, so it was a similar thing. It hasn't been fully, like the team hasn't come out and confirmed it, but, like, it was his speculations, and,
like, God, he had 3 pit stops, like...
Because he probably kept saying, like, I'm losing grip, what's going on? And it's because there's no downforce to the floor. Like, poor guy. Poor guy.
And my number one, biggest womp womp moments, because it's just where I felt the most just devastated and sad, is Lance's DNF, because that radio of, stop the car! Just stop the car now, stop the car on track. That was terrifying. It was scary. God, he can't catch a break between his wrists and now, like, this race, it's been a rough time for Lance. So, you know what? I'll give you the top of the podium here, buddy.
I'm sure he wants that top of the podium.
I know. It's been a rough one.
I want a Lance podium so badly. I really thought that there was an opportunity this week. And then there was a safety car. And even though it was caused by him, but, like, then Max just got to, like, go, but
yeah, as soon as it's, you know, people are like, it could have been a virtual safety car, but it's a whole bunch of things we don't need to go into right now. But as soon as it became an actual safety car, it was like, well, Max could have just waited a little and then just like, but rough time. And it was just not an ideal situation and a very scary radio to receive. So sorry, Lance, maybe Australia?
Yeah. Well, you know, guess what, Nicole? Since that closes our race recap questions, I can officially tell you that it's Australian GP week.
I mean, it's not Australian GP week, but
close enough. It is now
the next race.
The next race is the Australian.
Is the Daniel Ricciardo Grand Prix. I'm so excited. I miss him so much.
Hey, podcast listeners. Gossip Grid here, your guide to F1's paddock elites.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Gossip Grid. And boy, oh boy, do we have a jam-packed segment for you this week. Pop culture is overflowing everywhere in F1, and I'm here to tell you everything about it. First off, Taylor Swift kicked off the Eras Tour this week with 44 songs. She's a Lewis Hamilton fan. Next. Okay.
Wasn't Midnight's like 44 minutes long or something?
Midnight is also 44 minutes long and was released the weekend of CODA. You were so right. I didn't put that together right now. This is a live reaction. Taylor Swift is a Lewis Hamilton fan, and I will not do anything different.
That's my headcanon.
And it's 44 minutes without the 3 a.m. edition. Don't tell me that it's otherwise. Trust me. I know. Okay. We had will.i.am was in Saudi Arabia, and they actually had to vacate, drivers and team members had to vacate the track early because will.i.am was filming a music video on the Saudi Arabian track. really wild. And Saudi Arabia the GP used him to promote the race. So we'll be excited to see whenever that music video comes out. There was a lot of talk last week on the internet with Cristiano Ronaldo and that he's absolutely required to attend the Saudi Arabian GP since he's moved to a Middle Eastern club team and was getting paid £173 million per year. That part of that insane contract was he has to attend the race. Well, not true. He did not attend the race. But he is an F1 fan. We've seen him at the Monaco GP, and he's visited the Ferrari factory with Carlos and Charles. But this clause was not real because he literally was not there this past weekend. But who was there? Lots of celebrities, lots of people performed. But Will Smith was as close as you could possibly get to a car without driving it. He absolutely loves Lewis. He, quote, "Lewis is my guy. Lewis is my man." During Martin Brundle's grid walk, a very different grid walk than our grid walk, but Martin Brundle walked up to Will Smith and was able to ask him one question and was really curious of, have you been asked to be in the new, Brad Pitt F1 movie that's being produced by Lewis? Will Smith very humbly said that he had not been asked yet, but he hasn't been told no either. And of course, then made a big joke about how he needs to get rid of his gut to fit into the car. So it'll be interesting to see who ultimately gets cast in that movie. Hasn't started filming yet, will be later this year. No casting has been announced yet, but know that I will share as soon as it does. Yesterday on the Roscoe Loves Coco, so if you don't know who Roscoe is, first off, he's the biggest star of Formula One. He is Lewis Hamilton's dog, and we love him. He's so adorable, he's so cute. On his Instagram yesterday was shared a Be Real photo where, Roscoe posted, on Instagram and did not crop out the username on the end of the Be Real. It is at Roscoe Pup if you want to attempt to request it. But I did, and it said too many pending requests. So me and Roscoe, a.k.a. Lewis, can't be friends just yet on Be Real.
I have a lot of questions about this post, coming from someone who's apparently a boomer and has never used Be Real. I thought the whole thing with Be Real is that you're taking a photo of you and what's in front of you. So I'm confused and thought Lewis pulled a template and put like a photo in each one, because how do you have Roscoe in both photos? He can't be in both places at the same time. Help, please.
Again, as someone that used Be Real for maybe like a second, but because I just was peer pressured and wanted to try it out, there's like a delay, so you can, when you take a picture, it takes it one way, and then you can like move and it takes it the other way. I'm unsure if it's the selfie first, the other one first, but there's a way that you can be in both. So basically, how I imagine this whole thing is Lewis is sitting in his car, takes a picture of Roscoe, and then moves so that it's a selfie of him and his dog, and then he saves it, posts it on Instagram, and then either tried to crop the username but didn't. But Be Real also doesn't give you any contact information. You can't even go on a profile.
Right.
So, but I am taking this as confirmation that Lewis runs the Roscoe Instagram account.
That will be my headcanon until someone physically tells me otherwise. I imagine Lewis sitting there in the Mercedes garage going, "Ooh, let's post the photo of my dog for the day," because that's what I want to think, and I will live in that state.
Want to work with Dad today.
Right. It is the one thing about Lewis Hamilton that I could say is like a very normal, geeky thing to do. Most of Lewis Hamilton is ethereal, how are you a person on this earth? But the mental image of him running his dog's Instagram account makes him human, and it's needed.
So human. Oh my god. Speaking of Lewis, recently they had the Mission 44, which is his foundation, an inaugural dinner for Mission 44. Not an important part of the story about the dinner, but Lewis Hamilton is an outfit repeater, which is huge and makes him more human. He wore actually one of his Bahrain GP paddock outfits to this dinner. My personal favorite's an all red fit, and it's beautiful. But the important part of this, the Mission 44 dinner, so they came all together. It was a large organization. He was there with his parents and his stepmom, and it didn't really seem like there was other big name celebrities there, because everybody else there was an advocate for a greater, bigger cause. And they shared a video about the dinner, and it was all talking about what they've achieved, what they hope to be doing in the future. Their slogan, reimagining the future. There were speeches from several different advocates, so many women. I love that, and you can always count on Lewis for that representation. It was a British poet. I apologize, I tried to pronounce this, but I'm forgetting how to pronounce this correctly. His name was Nizam Speaks. He's a big famous British poet, and then another British singer, Ray, maybe one of those two, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, performed. And it was just a really wonderful moment of recognizing artists and recognizing advocates. So shout out to Mission 44 for doing wonderful, great work. Netflix yesterday announced they announced the casting of Senna for the Senna Netflix miniseries that they announced back in 2020. Yesterday would have been Senna's 63rd birthday. So the Brazilian actor that would be playing him is Gabriel Leon. He's very well known in Brazil. And he is nationally known for being in a telenovela called Hidden Truths. And then he was also the lead of the first original Amazon Prime video show that took place and produced in Brazil. This show is going to be a 6-episode mini-series. Unfortunately, it was originally announced as 8 episodes. We've lost 2 episodes, but any kind of insight on Senna, I'm really excited to see, especially because it's being produced with the blessing and participation of his entire family. His sister was really excited about the casting of Gabriel as Senna to play him. The filmmaker and the showrunner is also a Brazilian director, and he basically just came out and said not only is he making a series about an F1 legend, but a Brazilian hero. We're going to see a lot about Senna on track, but what I'm excited about is to see the investment of his relationships off track. It's a huge, huge project for Netflix. Brazil is currently one of their biggest booming markets, so it makes unbelievable sense they're doing this about Senna. Filming hasn't started yet, and there's no word on the release date yet, speculated 2024, so sadly we have to wait. We also got a lovely story from GP Racing Magazine. Valtteri Bottas bears all. The naked truth, literally. The article is titled Badass Bottas because we see his butt. Not the first time we've seen his butt, but first time I guess we've seen it in print. I don't know what the article's about because you have to buy the magazine, but I can tell you I've seen the photos.
How many times? I think it's become his thing. I like that he embraces that his thing. That it's like, right, I'm just gonna be naked everywhere. And we're like, all right, Valtteri, you do that. It led me down a train of thought that the ESPN body issue first needs to come back. And if it does, what F1 driver would be in the body issue? Because F1 has become like a big mainstream, heavily talked about American thing now. So I could see the producers of the body issue sitting there being like, we have to get an F1 driver. I understand that Valtteri would be like, yeah, sure, I'm in, I'm doing that. But I don't think he's a big enough star. So like, who do you think? Like, I just like going down this train of thought of like, what wild thing would happen? Like, would Lewis be in the body issue?
He's the answer.
Right.
He's the answer only from the superficial space of he's a star, has the physical, like, toned physique that works for the body issue. And I'm saying this not trying to like shame anybody else. I'm just going by the brand of the ESPN body issue is that Lewis has that big name brand star and everything. And I also just don't think Max would do it. Is the other piece of this. Yeah. I think Max would say no. It's not that I don't think I think ESPN would love to have Max to be in the body issue. I don't think Max would do it.
It really set my brain down like, oh my gosh, if the body issue was still here, like, would we be seeing F1 drivers in the ESPN body issue? And I think we would be.
I think we would. It'd be interesting to see who would say yes, because I am also going back, and I don't know if Lewis would necessarily say yes to it. Valtteri obviously would. I think Daniel Ricciardo would, but yeah. I don't know if they would be the picks for the issue.
Right. I wonder if the conversation would be had with Ferrari, because it would be like, oh, it'd be really great to like have a Ferrari driver part of this, but like, is that against Ferrari?
Would never.
Yes.
Ferrari would be like, okay, they could do it, but they have to wear a Ferrari suit jacket over everything else. Like, they will not. Oh man. Well, we'll have to see if ESPN decides to ever bring that back. But maybe maybe someone at ESPN will see this spread and be convinced that they need to bring it back. Exactly. And we will be wrapping up to this week's Gossip Grid with some words from a lovely member of One Direction, Niles Horan. Oh, I am a Harry girl, but I love Niles so very much. Niall Horan was being interviewed with Hits Radio, answering questions from fans, and someone was like, I need to know who his favorite F1 driver is. And no surprise, because we saw him at the French Grand Prix. Niall loves Lewis. He's a big Lewis fanboy. He was fanboying over Lewis. 7 world championships. Loves Lewis. He's great. You can't deny it. He mentions Max, Charles, Carlos, and Perez, and then immediately returns back to Lewis, and then shouts out Mercedes for taking great care of him of the French Grand Prix last year. I would like to notice, Niall was very, very excited to share that he fell in love with Formula One by watching Drive to Survive. And it's so funny, if you read through all the comments, that no one thinks he's less of a fan because he found it through Drive to Survive. And I just thought that was, just a really funny, interesting thing that, I maybe have not seen elsewhere. So it's okay if you're a fan of F1 because of Drive to Survive. Niall Horan is, and he loves Lewis Hamilton. And that's all I got for you this week on Gossip Grid. It was jam-packed. They're really giving us a lot of pop culture, so I'm sure we'll have more for you in the coming weeks.
All right, time for Yellow Sector notes. Like always, not the fastest walk around F1, but we will complete a full lap around the F1 paddock, hitting every F1 garage. Starting out with a biggie today, Red Bull, the energy drink manufacturer that owns the racing teams, was raided by the EU this morning due to investigations into antitrust suspicions. With this and Haas, it's definitely been an interesting week for companies that own F1 racing teams. Aston Martin created a great road car ad referencing the speed of their F1 car, where the shadow of their road car was the F1 car. Very cool. GQ Australia wrote an article about Lewis already being the 2023 style champion of F1. And look, if he's not going to be the driver's champion this year, I'll take style champion. I think we can award him that now. Ferrari's power unit will be displayed at the F1 exhibition in Madrid, which is cool because they did say it was going to be a modern Ferrari power unit. So probably not the current spec, but still cool to see inside all of that. Esteban was filming for Alpine Road Cars this week in Paris. Valtteri will be making an appearance at a Puma store in Australia where he is going to be interviewed by fellow mullet enthusiast Ned Brockman. So if you're in Australia, definitely go check that out, and please send us photos of them together if you haven't, because that sounds incredible. Gunther is going to be in the Fox booth for the NASCAR race this weekend that's happening at COTA. Williams dropped its Australian GP merch line. It looks really cool. Nick dropped his merch line, and unfortunately, currently there are no Debris-themed items. I think that's a missed opportunity. Oscar Piastri and his girlfriend toured parts of Melbourne in a video for the Australian GP. And Lando Norris was on Tom Daly's podcast, Made with Love. That is the grid walk for March 16th, 2023 completed. How was my sector time today, Nicole?
Well, that was faster than the FIA figured out the Alonso penalty situation, which isn't saying very much.
I feel like that was very slow then.
Anything is faster than how they did that, so...
True.
Well, we want to give a big thank you, as always, to VoiceOver Man, nationwide shipping for Wawa Coffee, basically keeping Briana alive, and our four-legged executive producers. Parker, I miss you. I'll see you tomorrow. Turn on auto downloads and rate and review the pod. It really, really helps us out. You have absolutely no idea. Shout out to the people listening on Apple Podcasts. Pretty please let us know what you are liking about the pod, what we can improve, what we could do differently. Let us know. We want to try some couple of different things out. Follow us on all of the social media platforms of your choice at Gridwalk Show everywhere for some daily grid walks. And we will be back every Thursday, and we hope that you join us. But today felt like a secret on the grid bike walk. Or a secret on the grid bike ride.